Julius Robert Oppenheimer was born in a Jewish family on April 22, 1904 in New York. His mother, Ella, was a painter with the name Henry Friedman, and his father, Julius Seligman, was a successful businessman. His father was a German born in the Kingdom of Prussia who came to America without any education but was able to get rich very quickly, and Oppenheimer and his family moved to a prosperous neighborhood at the age of 12, settles in Manhattan, and immigrates. He started his education first in a private school and even finished the 3rd and 4th grades in 1 year, and graduated in 1921, and the next year at the age of 18, he entered Harvard College, and in his first year of attending class, he was exempted from elementary school, and because of his interest in thermodynamics, he became interested in experimental physics. And in 1925, he graduated from college with a bachelor's degree in chemistry and continued his studies at Cambridge University. And he was very unhappy in Cambridge, to the extent that his friend says, "I am having bad days and the laboratory work is terribly boring, and I am so bad at it that it cannot be said that I am learning anything." And in Cambridge, he was on the verge of suspension and expulsion several times, and he even suffered from depression and deep mental problems and was a skinny smoker who often forgot to eat because of thinking too much. He then moved from Cambridge to the University of Göttingen, which was one of the most famous universities in the world in the field of theoretical physics, and many of his friends achieved remarkable success, including Werner Heisenberg, Pascual Jordan, Wolfgang Pauli, and Paul Dirac. There, he enthusiastically participated in discussions and seminars, and even argued so much that other students threatened to boycott the class. In 1927, at the age of 23, he received his doctorate in philosophy and published several important papers, one of the most important of which was the Born-Oppenheimer paper, which, with the help of his professor Max Born, distinguished nuclear motion from electronic motion in mathematical treatment, isolates molecules, and allows nuclear motion to be neglected to simplify calculations. Then he returned to the United States and started working at the California Institute of Technology, and then began a trip to Europe, giving lectures at institutions and universities, and in the Netherlands he was nicknamed Oppie. Was given, and then he worked for a while in Switzerland on quantum mechanics and continuum spectrum with Wolfgang Pauli, and after returning to the United States, he accepted an assistant professorship at the University of California. He was infected with tuberculosis for a while, and then when he returned to the university, he gradually became known as a very popular professor among students who were very attracted to him, and many were fascinated by his speech and behavior, the way he walked, and even his desire to read texts in the original language. They were fascinated by him. For a large part of his life, he was far from worldly issues and did not even read newspapers. And according to himself, he became aware of this issue 6 months after the fall of Wall Street, and he did not vote in the presidential elections until 1936. But from 1934, he was somewhat interested in issues. He became interested in politics and spent part of his salary to help physicists fleeing from Nazi Germany and supported social reforms in the 1930s, which were later identified as communist, and he supported the activities of leftist political groups for years. But he did not officially join the Communist Party of America. He was in a relationship with Kitty Punning, who was married twice and was an active member of the Communist Party. And while Kitty had married a doctor in 1939, Kitty was practically living with him because of a scandal with Oppenheimer. And when she found out pregnant, she divorced and married Oppenheimer for the 4th time, and their first child was born in 1941, and their second child was born in 1944. Became very interested in mysticism since his time at Harvard, and even studied and translated Hindu texts, including the Gita, and he even named his car Garuda, which is the mountain bird of Vishnu, the Hindu god. In 1942, Oppenheimer was appointed by Leslie Groves as the director of the Manhattan Project, and he also appointed Oppenheimer to head the Secret Weapons Laboratory despite his left-wing background and the fact that he had not won the Nobel Prize. It was about the creation of the atomic bomb, and in the future, everyone considered his appointment by Groves as a real genius on his part. Oppenheimer and Groves needed a remote and secret place to do their work, and they chose New Mexico for this and built the Los Alamos Laboratory. At first, Oppenheimer did not realize the magnitude of the project, but over time, the number of his colleagues increased from a few hundred people to 6,000 people in 1945, and he played an important role in dividing and leading this large group of researchers. He and his colleagues were first trying to make a plutonium gun, but after a few attempts, they abandoned it and decided to make an explosive weapon. And finally, the final construction of the atomic bomb was completed and they informed the Army. And finally, the world's first atomic explosion was carried out on July 16, 1945 in New Mexico, with the name Trinity, named by Oppenheimer himself. He later said that during the explosion, he and his colleagues were thinking like this. We knew that the world would not be the same. Some people laughed, some people cried, most people were silent. I was reminded of a line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. And Shenu tries to convince the prince to do his duty, and to impress him, he shows himself the shape of many hands and says, "Now I have turned into death, and I am the ruler of the world." I think we are all the same. I thought so.
We knew the world would not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that one way or another.
He and his colleagues felt like heroes, but he and many of his colleagues on the project resented the bombing of Nagasaki and considered it unnecessary. Oppenheimer traveled to Washington on August 17th of the same year and delivered a letter to the Secretary of War expressing his disgust with the atomic bomb and requesting its ban, and in October of the same year when he met with President Harry Truman. At the beginning of the meeting, he told him that his hands were stained with blood, and these statements angered Truman, and he ended the meeting and later told his deputy, "I don't want to see that strange boy in my office anymore." The Manhattan Project was secret during the war, and the world learned about it only after the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and Oppenheimer became the symbol of this project and the atomic weapon, and the pictures were printed in magazines all over the world. He then led scientists to return to theoretical physics and pre-war issues, and in 1949, he became a member of the Atomic Energy Commission, trying to direct nuclear activities to be peaceful and to encourage the creation of an international control organization. The author supported this issue. The Soviet Union tested its first atomic bomb in 1949, and in the American government and military, there was a strong discussion for the further development of atomic weapons, and many supported the plan to build a hydrogen bomb. But even though Oppenheimer had the ability to build such a bomb, he later, since the war, he was against the construction of such a bomb and did all he could to prevent its construction, and even though he initially joined the development program of this weapon, due to his continuous opposition after the end of his term as a member of the Atomic Energy Commission, he joined other opponents. They left, and Truman replaced them with people who were in favor of building a hydrogen bomb. In the following years, by participating in various government projects and committees, he tried to fight against the creation of hydrogen and atomic bombs and tried to persuade American statesmen to agree with the Soviet Union on the creation of hydrogen bombs. And in an article, he announced that America and the Soviets cannot achieve nuclear absolute power and can only create terrible things. His statements made him more influential in the public sphere, but at the same time he became an enemy of the hydrogen bomb advocates, who distrusted him and were afraid of Oppenheimer's great power. A little later, he was accused of spying for the Soviet Union and became one of the victims of McCarthyism. He tried to deny this accusation and requested a hearing and participated in the hearing, and with some testifying against him and some in his favor, His security clearance was finally revoked, and it was decided that he should be used as a consultant. However, his accusation of espionage was never proven, and in 2009, it was found that this claim was baseless, and the scientific community also referred to him as a martyr of McCarthyism. He spent the rest of his life lecturing in various assemblies and countries and spending time with his family, and tried to fight the dangers of scientific inventions for mankind along with Albert Einstein and Bertrand Ross, and in the following years, he also received awards from presidents. Received different, Oppenheimer was a chain smoker and was diagnosed with throat cancer, and when the treatment failed, he went into a coma on February 15, 1967, and died on February 18th at his home at the age of 62. And the life of the man who created the most disastrous weapon in the world is over.